Hi, happy Saturday. Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden, and I'm broadcasting to you live from Ottawa, as I do every day, almost without exception. Thanks for joining me today. I've got a lot of material to go through. No interviews today. We've done a lot of those lately, but some stories that I think will be of particular interest to you. Be back in mere moments.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. You know, from a hate crime hissy fit to a Christian being canceled, this country is upside down. And that's what we've been saying all week about the Freedom Convoy trial. But I say at this point, please subscribe to the station because YouTube is again suppressing us. And if you don't advise people to watch the station, YouTube will not do it. I appreciate your help in doing so. Thank you so much for your support. Please subscribe. We're almost at the 60,000 mark. It is like pulling teeth at times to get those subscribers. People are being unsubscribed every day. Please resubscribe. Check to make sure you're subscribed because when the subscriptions go up, our voice is heard by more people. But share this broadcast with your friends and family, loved ones. Please do. We really appreciate it. And have a look at my Substack today, by the way, which is just out. Here we go. Yes. Why does Doug Ford want Chris Barber's truck? Big Red. This to me is the outrage of the month. Along with the fact that Chris Barber is up for 8 years, potentially 8 years in jail if the Crown gets its way. And I say again, this is Doug Ford. Doug Ford's judiciary. This is the Ontario Crown. This is not the federal government. This is the provincial government that wants to put away Chris Barber for 8 years and Tamara Leach for 7. And they want his truck. This is bloody communism. I'm sorry, but that's what it is. When the state starts expropriating people's livelihood so they can't work anymore. So they'll be dependent upon the state. It's just outrageous. And I can't stop saying enough about this. Going to get to our main story in a second. I just wanted to show you this. Look at the great job Mark Carney's doing. Remember during the election campaign, he can work with Donald Trump. He has Donald Trump's respect. He's got the elbows up and he's going to be fighting for Canada strong. Of course it was all BS. But you know what, folks? I think Mark Carney wants the tariff war because it takes the focus away from him and his conflicts of interest and his horrible incompetence or willful incompetence because he wants to sell this nation out to the globalist cause. That's what Mark Carney's all about. He loves the trade war with the United States because there he has the U.S. tariff Trump boogeymen. And he can get Canadians all riled up about Donald Trump and the tariff and the United States dominating us so they won't look at Mark Carney's character, his conflicts of interest, his lies, and the fact that this man should never have been elected prime minister. It's an absolute outrage. I want to go to, I think, probably the outrage of the week after the Freedom Convoy trial, which I think is the outrage of perhaps the year. But this to me, here's CBC having a hissy fit over an alleged hate crime. And you won't believe this. If you haven't seen this yet, you won't believe what the hate crime is. And when I get back, I'm going to explain the nuances behind this.
A design on shirts and hoodies sold by an online apparel company mocking Tim Hortons is being called out for its racist undertones. The company says it's meant to be satire, but some concerned citizens say this isn't humor. It is something more vile. Stephanie Thomas reports.
Thank you. You have a nice day.
The cafes are iconic in Canada, and now the name Tim Hortons has been swapped out on the design of this T-shirt sold by an online company called Alberta Unchained. It says Sing Hortons, using a common South Asian name. The line below reads, "Now hiring Timmigrants."
Hate is hate, and it's in many different forms.
The apparel company refused an interview with CTV News and did not answer questions about who is behind the company, where they are based, or how many items with this design have been sold. Instead, it sent this statement saying, to clarify, the Sing Hortons design is a piece of satire. It is not racially motivated, nor is it intended to target any community.
Okay, do you see this? It's Alberta behind this. This is, once again, this is what the mainstream media wants you to think, that Alberta is this horribly racist province that's going to what? Expel all the immigrants. And it's going to be a whites-only society. That's what they want you to believe. And that's why they're saying they're targeting Alberta. Have a look at this story on X. You'll see literally hundreds of memes pop up from across the country. So this is not about Alberta, but of course they want you to think that because Alberta wants independence right now, and that's what this is all about.
The executive director of Stop Hate AB says humor can be a cop-out to cover up anti-immigrant sentiment and says the design should be called out for being hateful.
To collectively stand against hate is us actually doing an action towards ending it. Ignoring it gives it space.
Tim Hortons' hiring practices have come under fire for the company's reliance on temporary foreign workers for paying low wages and reducing opportunities in communities with high youth unemployment.
Wait a minute, temporary foreign workers? No, I was informed this morning by somebody who knows this file very well that these are international students that the government has brought in at the rate of 1 million every quarter on the false premise that they can become citizens. It's a citizenship scam. So we're bringing all these students into the country. They're taking these jobs, low-paying jobs at Tim Hortons. Have you ever gone through a Tim Hortons drive-through, or for that matter, a Wendy's, a McDonald's, any fast food restaurant, and been unable to understand the person on the other end who you're giving your order to? You're saying, sorry, I didn't understand that. I can't hear you. That's because they can't speak English in many cases. They can barely understand English. They can barely speak it. And that's why this pushback is occurring right now. It's nothing to do with race. It's that if you come to Canada and you work in a store, you should probably be able to speak English or perhaps even French. But no, this is why people are pushing back. It's because they're sick and tired of the government bringing in millions of students on a false premise, and many of these students getting low-paying jobs and then being unable to even speak the language. And that's the issue here. And I've got more to say on this in a minute.
Tim Hortons turned down an interview with us, instead sending a statement reading, "There are over 100,000 hardworking Tim Hortons team members across the country who are members of our local communities, and they do not deserve to be exposed to such blatant racism. We will be taking swift action to hold the people behind this accountable."
Oh, really? What kind of swift action is the woke Tim Hortons going to take? I can't wait to find out, because this is absolutely absurd to call this some kind of hate crime or to suggest this is just horrible racism. Now, more to say in a minute.
Not much can be done within a criminal matter.
Legal experts say the design doesn't amount to a hate crime, but taking on
disgusting, prejudicial kinds of ideas is through, the cleansing light of publicity.
Stephanie joins us now. Steph, the legal expert you spoke with is.
I got to add at this point, before we listen to Stephanie here, have you noticed that everybody commenting on this are white people? And it's like these virtue signaling white people who just love to find an issue that will distract you from the fact that they want to put away Chris Barber for 8 years and Mary Leach for 7. That's what this is about. Don't focus on the fact that Canada is going down the chute, is becoming an authoritarian country with political prisoners. Focus on the fact that, we horrible people from Alberta are racist.
Suggesting that the bar for what constitutes a hate crime may actually be too low.
Right, Tara. And he says that in the age of social media, that hateful and offensive thoughts can spread all too quickly, and that it extends to outside in real life. Now, Doug King also adds that Canadians are getting very tired of racial comments, of racial slurs, of anti-Semitism, of hate crimes, that maybe eventually the Supreme Court of Canada is going to have a second look at its definition of a hate crime.
Oh, have a second look, Stephanie. Make hate crimes even more easy to enforce, even though they should never be on the books in the first place, nor should they be an aggravating factor in any crime. I can tell you this: hate is impossible to define, because Karl Marx could be considered hateful of capitalism. So are we going to ban the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital because it's hateful? You have a right to not to like something without being accused of being hateful about it. This is how crazy our country is. It's upside down. And it just amazes me how, this CTV, I think I incorrectly said a CBC report. CTV is as bad as CBC now in terms of being so woke. But here they go. Yeah, we need the Supreme Court to toughen up our hate crimes. So if you wear a T-shirt like that, you're going to be thrown in jail for a hate crime. Would I wear a T-shirt like that? Probably not. Probably not. I don't think so. Because yes, I don't want to walk around and offend people over issues like this. I wear T-shirts that bring up philosophy, political ideology, but neither do I think if somebody wants to wear a T-shirt like that because it's a parody, that they should be criminalized for doing it. That is absurd. And it's a complete abrogation, as usual, in this country, of free speech. I tell you, our democracy is disappearing. Our freedom of speech is evanescent. Our ability to focus on issues that really matter is passing. And this is all about making identity politics acceptable. And this stupid suggestion that Canadians are just sick of this. No, what they're sick of is a government bringing in mass migration, bringing in students at $1 million a quarter, who are then taking jobs and thinking they're going to be citizens. And Doug Ford in Ontario wants to make the rules even easier by declaring asylum seekers refugees. And that's where we are with this. Now, I want to move to another story here because this is amazing. MAGA affiliated musician scheduled to play in BC public parks despite pushback. Well, you know what? So far, he is. Yeah. So far. I don't know how much longer he's going to be allowed. But we have to have a look. We have to have a look at this story here. Here. Got to share the screen. Here he is. And it amazes me, the outrage over this. If somebody like this wants to perform, maybe they should be at a church, not at a public space, outdoors, said Kaz Zebentitis, I think it is, a resident of West Kelowna. My tax dollars go towards this space, and I don't want a dime of it going towards supporting someone who is divisive and who has some very controversial views. All right, so incredible. The guy in question here is a United States preacher, as they call him, because that sounds real low down, deep south when you call him a preacher. He's a pastor and a musician. His name is Feucht. He has been affiliated with MAGA. Oh my God. Yes, with MAGA. And you know that's got to be a bad thing. Yeah, that has got to be a very bad thing. So I'm amazed that we've come to the point in this country that if you're a Christian, you can't perform or speak in a public place anymore. You have to go to your church. And then the police will come to your church and throw people out or prevent people from going in because you don't have a permit. This happened in Montreal, Quebec City. He went to a church to perform and the police barred the door, tried to get people from not go in, and then said they're going to charge the church because they didn't have a permit. They didn't have a permit from the city to have somebody perform in the church because the guy wasn't allowed to perform in a public place because he's a Christian. Now, do you think we have a problem here? I would suggest we have a problem here. We are a post-Christian society where we aren't even allowed to be Christians anymore. Now, just imagine for a second, if this was a Jewish performer or a Muslim performer, and he was denied access to a public place, or he went to the synagogue or the temple and the police were there to throw people out. Can you imagine the outrage from the woke media about that one? But no, it's okay if it's a Christian. It's okay. You can just stomp on a Christian anytime you want in this country, especially an evangelical Christian like this guy. And especially if he's affiliated in any way with those horrible Make America Great Again people and actually has a picture of himself with President Donald Trump on his social media. That means he is absolutely anathema in Canada. He is canceled. He can't perform anywhere in this country because he's associated with Christianity. And oh my goodness, with Donald Trump and MAGA too? Well, I'm sorry. You can't perform in public places. This guy has been canceled from one Canadian city after another. He might get to perform in British Columbia. He might get to perform today. I understand he's trying to perform in Ottawa, one of the woke cities in the world. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm tempted to go out and find out today. But this to me is completely emblematic of how upside down Canada has become. We cancel Christians. We tell you they can't go anywhere. They can't go to a public place to perform Christian music or preach the gospel. They can't even go to a private church without the approval of the municipality, or the police will come and rough you up. That is COVID all over again. Remember when the police were literally going into churches and dragging people out and fining and arresting pastors and people going to churches because they were violating the pandemic rules and the mandates? This is why we needed the mandates reversed and stopped. But guess what? The mentality is alive and well in Canada, and we still are dealing with this nonsense. And it's absolutely
Pierre Poilievre now running for a seat in Alberta, but facing déjà vu in the form of an extremely packed ballot.
I've never seen anything like that.
Much like the federal election where he lost his Ottawa seat, a non-partisan group called the Longest Ballot Committee is signing up candidates in his new riding. It's calling for electoral reform, in this case by getting nearly 200 people to run.
This is a scam. It is unfair, it is unjust, and it must stop.
These aren't real candidates, Poilievre wrote in a letter to federal government House Leader Stephen McKinnon. This is a coordinated scheme to weaponize the ballot. He's asking for changes to electoral law, including a candidate needing signatures from 0.5% of the population in any given riding instead of the current 100 people.
Coming from a candidate that has never stepped foot in Battle River-Crowfoot before these elections, that is very ironic.
The longest ballot committee says this is not about Poilievre, it's about Canada's electoral system.
In our current first-past-the-post system, politicians game the system. They're the ones who decide the way our elections are run. And obviously there's a conflict of interest, since they are the ones who directly benefit from our current system.
This candidate is also in favor of the committee's existence. He has mobility issues and says the group helped him get the endorsements he needed, adding Poilievre's proposal would shut him out.
He better get his running shoes on, because I will be pushing that if he wants that kind of change, then he better do it himself.
But another independent candidate says protests like these can be detrimental.
There is absolutely no way on the ballot to differentiate me from all these protest candidates from outside our riding who are causing issues.
The government says it also shares Poilievre's concerns and is examining the issue. For now, Elections Canada says it's looking for ways to make sure this by-election goes smoothly, and will have more to say in a few days.
Okay, my question is, what are these people trying to prove? What is their objective anyway by putting up to 200 people on a ballot? What do they want to change? Why is it helpful to democracy to have 200 people on a ballot when obviously 190 of them don't even live there or have no hope in hell of winning and are just abusing the process? They're abusing the system. What are they trying to prove? Yes, we have a first past the post system. If they want proportional representation, then try changing the electoral system in a legitimate and rational way. Putting 200 people on a ballot isn't going to change the first past the post system to proportional representation, if that's what they want. I'm not even sure that's what they want, because they're not very clear. In fact, they sound like a bunch of idiots who don't know what they're doing except protesting for protest's sake. I'll tell you why I'm against this. And it's not just because Pierre Poilievre has faced this twice now. He faced it in Nepean, in his riding there. Did it have some effect? Of course it did. And I'll tell you why in a minute. And it's not just because it's being tried again on Pierre Poilievre in Battle River-Crowfoot. And this guy says, well, he never set foot in the riding. Of course he set foot in the riding before that. He grew up in Calgary. I'm sure he went to the Drumheller Museum. If you live in Alberta, you've been to the Drumheller Museum. That's the dinosaur center of the world. So don't give me that crap. He's never even been set foot in the riding. I'll tell you why I'm opposed to this chicanery, this shambolic approach to the election. And that's what it is. It's absolutely a scam, as Pierre Poilievre said. I agree with him 100%. Why is it a scam? Because a lot of people don't have a lot of patience when they're looking at a ballot. Maybe they're over 65. Maybe their attention span is low. Maybe they're 21 and their attention span is low. And they're saying, I can't find Poilievre's name on here. So they end up just ticking something else. Or they don't come to vote at all because they say, I'm not going to look at a ballot with 200 names. That's ridiculous. I don't have the patience for that. I don't have the time for it. So they don't vote. And I'll tell you another reason. Because there's a lot of third-party candidates, legitimate third-party candidates, like the one featured in that story, who are going to get mixed up with all of these non-entities who are just on the ballot for protest's sake, who haven't got a hope in hell of winning, but they have a hope in hell of sabotaging the election. And that's what this is about, sabotaging this election. So I have no sympathy, I have no time, I have no patience for these idiots for doing this, because it's not legitimate protest. In fact, they don't even articulate what the objective of their protest is, except to change it. How? How are you going to change it? What do you want to change it to? They won't say. But they're clearly in there for interference purposes only. So if you're an independent candidate like this woman here, who's actually lived in the riding for many, many years, you're going to get lumped in with all of those people who are just on the ballot because they're just on the ballot. They have no intention of ever becoming the next member of parliament. They know they won't become the next member of parliament. But third-party candidates like independents and say People's Party of Canada or Libertarian Party or some third-party candidate is going to be ignored completely and lumped in with all of these people who claim that they want to be the member of parliament. So people in the comment section have been saying to me all week, talk about this longest ballot in this by-election. Well, I'm talking about it. And I was asked about it yesterday in another broadcast, and I said the same thing. This is absolutely ludicrous. This is not a legitimate protest. And it is a scam, as Pierre Poilievre says it is. Now, I want to show, I think Poilievre's doing some good work lately, trying to articulate actual Conservative Party policies. And let's listen to this.
Hi, everyone. Congratulations, you're spending more money on taxes than on food, clothing, and shelter combined. That is the finding of the Fraser Institute's July 22nd, 2025 report, and it reports on last year, which shows that the tax burden of Canadians is up 2,784% since 1961, so just over 60 years ago, and that bill is vastly outstripping the bills that you pay for everything else. I'm going to quote directly from my laptop on this report. Taxes have grown much more rapidly than any other single expenditure for average Canadian families. Expenditures on shelter are up 2,100%, food up 927%, clothing up 460%, but the tax bill is up to 2,784%. So an absolutely staggering amount of money that is going to taxes. So the average family is spending 42% now on taxes. That is compared to 35% on food, clothing, and shelter. So you have to ask yourself, are you getting more from the government than you're getting from your private expenditures on food, clothing, and shelter? I have a hard time believing it. There are so many different taxes. We've got income tax, payroll tax, health tax, sales tax, property tax, profit tax, liquor, tobacco, amusement, and other excise taxes, fuel, motor vehicle license fees, and then other taxes. Then you've got natural resource taxes. These are the royalties that are paid when companies extract resources from the ground.
I'll just interrupt here for a second here because that was an excellent chart. I encourage you to have a look at that Fraser Institute report. Their information is always accurate. I've used it so many times in stories I've done. I interviewed yesterday a senior fellow from the Fraser Institute, and on her comments about the decline of Canadian democracy. And by the way, that information is in the description. So the political science professor from the University of Windsor, it was Lydia Melgett, and it was a fantastic interview. But the Fraser Institute has great information. But if you look at that chart and have a look at it at your leisure, because we are being literally taxed to death in this country. And this is what this country has come to. We're paying almost half of our income in taxes. That's a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for economic catastrophe because people are no longer working for themselves or their families. They're working for the state. That's called communism.
And then, of course, there are import duties that you pay when you buy things from abroad. All of those fees, charges, and other levies amounting to a tax bill that is far greater than anything you spend on anything else. In fact, the report goes even further. On page 6, they show the overall tax bill that includes the deficit. Now, the reason they do that is that deficits are taxes. They're You're taxed two ways through government deficit spending. One is through the deferred bill that you'll get later on, because of course deficits do have to be paid back one way or the other, and that bill does come to you. And the second way that deficits charge you is they increase the money supply, which causes inflation, and that inflation does charge you. It's a tax as well. And they show here that since 1961, that bill has grown dramatically as well, to the point where it is now higher than in any year except for the 2020 COVID year, which is, of course, a very unusual year indeed. But the point is that government's insatiable appetite is causing you a tremendous burden. It's like the private sector is a skinny man and the government is a fat man on his back. And the private sector is carrying that increasingly fat man up an increasingly steep hill. It's time to put him on the diet. It's time to reduce the cost of government. We need to cut bureaucracy.
I love that analogy. That's very good. Because we are carrying the fat man up the hill. And what's going to happen? We're going to collapse under the weight. And the fat man's not getting any skinnier. He's not losing any of the excess weight. So we're going to be completely crushed by the tax burden. And that's what the analogy is saying here.
Consultants, foreign aid, corporate welfare, and countless other things to bring down the cost of government. We also need a dollar for dollar law that will require government to find a dollar of savings for every new dollar of spending, so that there's an imposed discipline, an either or trade-off required. So you spend more here, you have to spend less there. That's what you do in your household budget. And only then will we be able to reduce this insane bill that is falling on your shoulders and crippling your family's ability to succeed. Low taxes mean that you get rewards for your work, that your investments pay off, that people are incentivized to create more, to grow more food, produce more energy, build more homes, invent new life-changing technologies. All of these things should be rewarded. And we should aim to make ourselves one of the lowest tax nations in the world. That would free up a lot of money for you to do great things for yourself and for your family. And that is what we are fighting for as conservatives, smaller governments with big citizens. Thank you very much.
Excellent report. I'm going to go to my usual store message, and I'll be back with more. Okay, better get it straight. I know I never wear ball caps on the program. Some people like them, some people don't. Want to show just a bit of this clip because I think it encapsulates why Mark Carney is perhaps the most dangerous prime minister in the history of this country.
So the media is making a big deal out of Mark Carney's latest flip-flop on government spending. After running an entire election platform promising to spend billions more, without any identified cuts or layoffs in the public service, he's now told his ministers to identify savings of 7.5% next year, 10% the year after that, and 15% by year 3. His office then leaked these letters with these instructions to the media, which has acted like these cuts are already complete, but not one penny in savings has actually been achieved. So far, it's just promises. That said, it might seem too early to judge whether he is going to keep these promises. However, Mr. Carney has been Prime Minister since March 14th, 2025, so the fiscal year that started April 1st of this year has been entirely under his watch, and he has introduced what are called the main estimates. That's the big spending bill that authorizes government to push money out the door. How does that bill compare to the one that the Trudeau introduced a year earlier? And how does the spending of Carney compare in numbers, not image, to his predecessor? Well, let's take a look. Trudeau's last spending bill had the government spending $449 billion per year. Now, under Carney, that spending bill is up to $487 billion a year. That is an 8% increase in just 1 year. 8% is double the combined rate of population growth and inflation, so the cost is vastly outstripping the need. And remember, this spending is stacked on top of the already bloated costs that Trudeau left behind. Now, Mr. Carney claims that he is going to spend less, but invest more. In other words, he wants to categorize more government spending as an investment and therefore artificially lower what is actually counted as an expenditure.
Now, this is why Carney is operating on a completely delusional plane. He's got an operating budget and then the real budget. And all you're going to see is the operating budget, which is whatever he wants it to be. This is called cooking the books. In a business, when you have two sets of books, you have the real set of books where you're possibly keeping money to yourself, and you have the public set of books. This is what this means. This is the operating budget and the actual budget. And you recall last December when we had that fiscal update, the fall fiscal update, literally with only 2 days left in fall before it became winter. And Chrystia Freeland, who was then finance minister, delivered that fall economic update. And she was so worried about going over that $50 billion deficit. That was the fiscal cliff. Mark Carney's already amassed over $300 billion on the deficit. We're sailing way past the fiscal cliff. And I think this is why Mark Carney is all illusion. He's all sleight of hand. He's a magician. The real question is it just incompetence? Is he stupid? No, he's very clever. He's very cunning. This is the deliberate wholesale sellout of a country. He wants to devalue the Canadian dollar and the US dollar in the process. He wants to align us with Europe so his friends in Europe make money off of this. And he wants an economic catastrophe in Canada. That's where he's going. And this is why we are focused on Donald Trump again. We're focused on tariffs. And so Mark Carney has no intention of fighting Donald Trump on tariffs. The two of them are working in tandem. Let's put it this way. It's a symbiotic relationship between the two of them. Mark Carney needs Donald Trump as the boogeyman, the enemy out there that he can focus on and tell Canadians to focus on. Donald Trump needs Mark Carney so he can walk all over Canada, because Mark Carney is a willing idiot to do that, because Mark Carney's not working for Canada strong. He's working for Europe strong and China strong and globalism strong. That's what Mark Carney's all about. And we have to remember that Mark Carney is not on our side. He's not on Canada's side. He's on the side of the European Union and on the globalist agenda. That's what Mark Carney's always been about. That's what he's going to continue to be about. Thank you for watching today. I'm going to leave it at that for today. It's been a pleasure as always. And I'll be back again on Sunday, probably a half hour early because I got to get to church tomorrow. It's been 3 weeks since I've been to church and I got to get there tomorrow. So thanks for watching today. We'll be back Sunday. Bye for now.